Greetings and welcome to Education and More's Learn Python 3 Programming at a Snail's Pace. My name is Marcus Gardner and I'm going to be the instructor for this course. In today's video, we're going to learn about functions. Now, I briefly talked about functions earlier. Today, we're going to go in a little bit more in depth, but we will continue to talk about functions forever. Okay? Functions are the lifeblood of Python, as well as many other programming languages, okay? You just wouldn't have a very good programming language if you didn't have functions, all right? So let's jump right in. Okay, as I told you before, functions must do something, okay? Now, they could take in maybe nothing, or they can take in some arguments. Now, as for returning something, there are three things it could do. One, it could return nothing. Okay? I'll get back to that in a minute. I'll show you an example in a little bit. Okay? And then it could return one thing. Okay? I'll show you an example in a minute also. And then it can return many things. Okay. Again, I'll show examples of these in just a couple minutes. All right. So, we have pre-made functions. These are functions that are already made for you. The ones that they thought, oh, most people are going to want. One of them we've already seen, input, okay? Very valuable function. We wouldn't have very interesting programs if we didn't have some type of input, okay? Now, input doesn't have to take an input. We normally put in the comment like enter a number, okay? And that's great for the user, okay? But it doesn't strictly need it. We can just say, input, and then the user's going to be like, what? Oh, what do I do? What do I type? Okay? But if it's just for you, that's acceptable, okay? Not great, but still, it's acceptable. But it could take an argument. And the argument is, the comment that you want to use, enter a number, enter an integer, enter your name, all right? Now, it always returns one item, okay? And that item is that one thing, and it's going to be a string. Input returns a string. So, that's an example of a function that returns one thing, okay? Now, here are two more functions that have already been made for you. Now, there's many others. I'm just going to talk about these two right now, okay? Max and min. Now, max and min can do quite a few things. We're only going to talk about a couple of them now, okay? So, let's show you some examples here. File new, file save as, and then this is going to be lesson 6. And then we click here, type in P, go down 6, I think it is, Python, there we go. Click save. All right. Now, min and max. Min and max. Let's have min, and then we do 4, 5. And then high is equal to max, 4, 5. Okay, so here we have minimum, and we're passing it two numbers. We could pass it thousands of numbers, okay? Same thing with max. And what it's going to do, it's going to find the very smallest number and return it back. For max, it's going to find the largest number and print it. So then we could print low and high. Okay? All right, so let's run this and find out what happens here. So we should get 4 and 5 on one line separated by a space. Python lesson 6.py. There we go. All right. Now, there's something else you can do. Many programmers do this, and that is print min 4, 5 and max 4, 5. Okay. In other words, don't store it in a variable. Just go ahead and print the result. There we go. Now, this is fine most of the time. Can you think of a reason why this is not good? I'll give you a couple seconds. Pause the video so if you want time to think about yourself. 1, 2. Okay, I hope you had time to pause the video. All right. It's not acceptable if you want to do something with it. You know, for example, after you printed the minimum number, maybe you want to add it to some other variable. Okay? You can't do that if you did this. You're going to have to save it into a variable. Otherwise, you got to do the computation again, and that's not acceptable. Okay? You know, for example, let's say you print it, and then later you want to print 5 plus the minimum of 4, 5. Okay? Now, this is not acceptable. Why? Because you called the function min twice. Whereas, if you stored it into a variable, then you could just type in low, the variable. Okay? And that is going to give you the same result, but at a cheaper cost. Now, I don't mean it's going to cost money. Well, actually it could if you're doing this on a supercomputer. Okay, that costs a lot of money. But on your regular PC, it doesn't really cost you money. But when we talk about cost, we're talking about how many cycles. Your personal computer, laptop, can do millions, maybe billions or trillions. I don't know how many, okay? Don't know what year you're watching this. Maybe you're watching this in 2025, okay? I don't know how many calculations per second computers are going to be by then, okay? But your calculator can do lots of cycles per second. But still, when you are a good programmer, you need to think about the cycles, okay? Most of the time. Now, sometimes I prefer more cycles if it's easier to read. Okay? I'm going to show you a bit of C code. And I'm going to explain why I like this because it's so intriguing. But anyway, whoops, sorry, not C, A, and then B. Okay, what this will do is that it will reverse A and B. Okay? It's the same thing as equal to, say, temp is equal to A. And then A equals B. And then B equals temp. Okay? Now, this is the way most people in C would code. Okay? This is a much faster way, but, you know, some coders who are not great at math or maybe entry-level coders will not understand this. So, honestly, I prefer this rather than this. Okay? So this is just an example of when something is a little bit more clear. To me, this is much more clear than this. Okay? Even though this may be faster. So there are going to be times when you are coding in Python when you can do some really nice tricks and make it very, very fast. But that's fine if you're all by yourself. But when you're coding for a team, to me, that's not acceptable. Because later on, I want to put you on, more important projects. And I want some entry-level people to take over your spot. And if they can't read your code, then it's not acceptable to me. Okay? Because then I got to spend a whole lot more time having them redo the whole program. Or, having you waste your time going back explaining your code. So, as a programming manager, which is what I used to be, I would find that unacceptable because you have to think about the future, not the now. The now is great. You can do things extremely fast, make it look all cool. That's great. But for a really good company, you need to think about the future. And to me, that's not acceptable. Okay. Something that's readable, easy to understand by entry-level programmers always beats, convoluted code that only the experts who have had 20 years of Python or, supernaturally smart can understand. The easy to read code wins every time. Okay. The reason is because we really don't need to worry about this a few cycles because our laptops are so good or our computers are so good. But still, when it comes to this type of thing, if you're going to reuse a function, okay, store it into a variable. That way you don't have to call the function again. All right. Okay. Now, this is an example. Print is a function. It took in 2 arguments and it returned 2 arguments. It printed 2 things. I'll show you a better one in a minute. Okay. All right. So those are pre-made functions. All right. So now we get to the most important part, custom-made functions. I don't have anything there because we are going to create them ourselves. So let's go back. What can they do? Well, first off, they could return nothing. Well, let me give you an example of that. Well, first off, to create your own function, you're going to define it at the top of your program. So let's call it help. My function doesn't need any parameters, so nothing goes in the inside. Always when you define it, you put a DEF in front, you give it a name, and then at the end you have your colon. And then I'm going to say print, press A to do this, print, press B to do that, etc. Okay? And we're done. Okay? Of course, not a very good helpful function, but anyway, just to show you an example of a custom function that returns nothing. Yes, it did something, but it didn't return anything. I'll give you an example of a return in a minute, but we've already actually seen that. Min is returning a number into here. Okay? So good. So then what do? Well, how do we call it? Just like here. Just like our min and max. Except here there's no parameters. So we're just going to call it help. Okay? So now let's run it. Press A to do this. Press B to do that. Now, we could pass it something. For example, name. And then name, comma. Name, comma. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and do the input statement. I'm just going to go ahead and say Marcus here. Of course, you won't do this because, if somebody else ran it, they don't want to see Marcus. Who's Marcus? Why do I care about Marcus? Okay. All right. So anyway, now we are going to see Marcus. Press A to do this. Okay. So this one takes in one variable. Now it could take in many different items. And here again, it doesn't return anything. All right. Now, what about a custom one that returns one item? Okay. All right. So let's say we want to create our own little function. And it's stupid. But anyway, define min1. Okay. And we're going to take in 2 numbers, A and B. Okay. And we're going to return A plus 1. Terrible. Okay. It doesn't even use B. Okay. This is a terrible function. Okay. don't call min1 with a second variable if you're not going to use the second variable. Okay? So, if I was doing a code review, I would say, hey, this is not acceptable. Okay? And plus, this function is not acceptable either. But anyway. So, what we got here is we've got some answer. And then we're going to call min1 and 4, 5. Or let's just do 4, 10. Okay? It's going to do nothing with this 10. But it's going to call it with 4. And then it's going to return 5. And I forgot to print. Always helpful if you print something. Okay? Try it again. There we go. 5. Okay, so there. We have created a function. Terrible function. But it took in a couple of arguments. Again, bad idea. But it returned 1 argument. All right. So, now how about return many things? Okay, we could do 2, but let's go and do many things. All right. So, define math stuff. Okay. We're going to take in 2 numbers here. This was not good. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but still 1 tab. All right. So now we're going to, I like more space, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. I am going to return. Now I could do some calculations, save it into variables, and then return it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to return min of AB. Okay? And then I'm going to return max of AB. And then I'm going to return A plus B. And then I'm going to return A times B. And then I'm going to return A plus B divided by 2. In other words, the average. Okay? So, what do I need to do here? I need to assign variables. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I'm returning 5 things, I need 5 variables. Okay? So, low, high, sum, prod, average. Okay? Now, maybe you might have thought, well, how do I know whether sum is a reserved word or not? Okay? Well, when you type in a reserved word, it's going to appear blue. Now, I don't know if this video recorder is going to actually show the blue versus the black, but when you're using the notepad, you can actually see that shows up as blue. So you said, oh, that's blue. That must be a reserved word. Okay? So, that's how you know, without having a list of reserved words, whether you've written a reserved word or not. Okay? All right. So, equals math stuff, and then all 10, 20. Okay? So, the minimum's 10, the maximum is 20, the sum is 30, the product is 200, and the average is 15. Okay? So, I'm just going to print those. I'm not going to type them. Copy, paste. Okay, save it. And there we go. Again, I said 15. It's actually 15.0 because anytime you do division, it's going to change it into a float. Okay? All right. So, you can return many things from a function. Okay? As many as you want. All right. So, let's see. Let's see if I covered everything here. Custom-made functions. Yes. And then we have our homework. Okay. Okay. Remember the most important things. When you define a function, make sure it's at the top of your program. Okay? Again, why is that? because Python starts at the top and goes down. Okay? So it needs to learn how to do a function before you call it. It's just like you learning, German. I don't want to ask you how to speak German if you haven't learned it yet. Okay? So first you learn how to do a function and then you call it. Okay? If you're going to have a function that calls another function, well, make sure that when you call that other function that it was already defined. For example, here in math stuff, maybe I wanted to call min1. Well, I got to make sure min1 is above math stuff. Okay? And that's part of your homework too. So, anyway. So, don't forget the colon at the end of your function. And then, of course, your tab determines where your function definition ends. And then you can start your another definition, keep going as many definitions you need, and then start your main program. Okay? Just remember, you want to store it into a variable if you're going to do something with it later, multiple times. If you're only going to do it one time, then you have the choice, storing it into a variable or just printing it. Okay? Like I did here. Print. I didn't store it into a variable. Okay? But do not call the function twice. Okay? If you need to call the function twice, then store it into a variable and then you can use it later on. So you've only called the function one time. Okay? All right. Again, I haven't given you a whole lot of homework for this one because the real homework is going to come later once you know how to do some more stuff. I think next is while, and that can really get interesting. Okay? Okay, so please take a look. If you have any questions, post them on the YouTube channel. But remember, please don't post the answers. All right? Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.